Bloomberg Audio Studios. Podcasts, radio, news.
Good morning, I'm Nathan Hager.
And I'm Karen Moscow. Here are the stories we're following today.
Karen, we begin with an update on the political landscape in India. Narendra Modi has vowed to continue as prime minister despite his party losing its majority in parliament. Modi will now need to rely on allies to form a government for the first time in a decade. Former governor of the Indian Central Bank, Raghuram Rajan, says the situation will be more positive for Indian citizens.
It forces India to choose a different course from the one it has been on, a course which has led to much wider unemployment and distress than needed in the country.
Raghuram Rajan, now professor at the University of Chicago's Booth School of Business, spoke to Bloomberg Surveillance. Stocks in India fell almost 6% yesterday. This morning, they are up 2.5%.
Well, in the UK, Nathan, British Prime Minister Rishi Sunak and opposition Labour Party leader Keir Starmer sparred over taxes, the cost of living, and the country's health system in a televised debate ahead of the July 4th election. A YouGov poll found that Sunak narrowly came out on top by 51% to 49%. Patrick English is their director of political analytics.
The public are very clearly split on who won this debate. And if you're Rishi Sunak, I think that that's quite a good thing, considering the MRP poll we put out yesterday suggested Labour on course for a landslide. I think he'd look at that and say, well, this is quite good for me. However, perhaps it's not quite the knockout blow that he might be looking for to really turn this campaign around.
Both contenders said they would maintain Britain's close ties with the United States if Donald Trump wins in November.
But before that, Karen, there are primary races. We've had more of those in 5 states, plus the District of Columbia. The biggest race from Tuesday night, though, was in New Jersey. Democrats are looking to hold on to embattled Senator Bob Menendez's seat, and their candidate will be Congressman Andy Kim. He won his race in a landslide with 75% of the vote.
What I always wanted to do with this race, when I jumped in the day after the indictment of Senator Menendez, was about giving the people of New Jersey a choice.
And Andy Kim will face Republican real estate developer Curtis Bashaw. He defeated a Trump-endorsed candidate, Christine Serrano-Glasner, by 7 percentage points, with 45.6% of the Republican vote. Menendez has filed for re-election as an independent, but Kim is heavily favored to win in November.
Well, Nathan, in another race that could tip the balance of power in the Senate, Montana Democrat John Tester will face Republican newcomer Tim Sheehy in a fight to hold on to his seat. The Trump-backed former Navy SEAL won his primary in a landslide with 73.6% of the vote. Tester cruised to victory with 97.1% in the Democratic primary.
President Biden, Karen, has signed a series of executive actions aimed at curbing the number of asylum seekers at the U.S. southern border. Bloomberg's Amy Morris reports from Washington.
Under the executive actions, if the number of migrants who reached the southern border hit 2,500 over 7 consecutive days, the president has the authority to shut down border entry. But President Biden says that does not apply to those seeking asylum through legal ports of entry.
But if an individual chooses not to use our legal pathways, if they choose to come without permission and against the law, they'll be restricted from receiving asylum and staying in the United States.
Well, because the numbers are already so high, the rule is in effect and migrants are being turned away. Republicans call the order too little, too late. Progressives call the move draconian. In Washington, Amy Morris, Bloomberg Radio.
All right, Amy, thanks. Now, President Biden is shifting his focus from immigration to international relations. The president has arrived in France for a 4-day visit that will include ceremonies marking 80 years since the D-Day invasion in Normandy during World War II and a state visit with President Emmanuel Macron on Saturday. The president also plans to meet with Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky on the sidelines of the D-Day event tomorrow. He's skipping a Ukraine peace summit in Switzerland later this month to attend a previously scheduled fundraiser in Los Angeles.
As for former President Trump, Karen, his defense team is asking New York Justice Juan Merchan to lift his gag order in the hush money case. Bloomberg's Ed Baxter reports.
Trump's team is arguing that the limits on speech are no longer needed with the trial over, saying the reasons for it no longer exist. Lead attorney Todd Blanche argues that it is very important in light of President Joe Biden's comments about the conviction after the verdict, as well as social media posts by witnesses Stormy Daniels and Michael Cohen. There's been no response from the Manhattan District Attorney's Office. Ed Baxter, Bloomberg Radio.
All right, Ed, thank you. Sticking with politics, Ray Dalio said internal conflicts will be the highlight of this year. The founder of Bridgewater Associates made the comments during a video speech at the Greenwich Economic Forum in Hong Kong today.
How will particularly the elections in the United States go? There are two questions related to that. Will the elections be accepted by both sides? And what are the consequences of that? We honestly don't know the answer. There are reasons for concern.
Ray Dalio added the policies from an administration run by Donald Trump would be very different from a Democratic one.
Turning to markets, Karen, Fed rate cuts remain in focus as Treasury yields come off their largest two-day drop of the year. For more, let's bring in Bloomberg's John Tucker. John.
And Nate, this is happening because of signs the U.S. economy is cooling off. So far this week, we've seen weakness in a manufacturing gauge and a bigger than expected drop in U.S. job openings. They, in fact, show the lowest level in over 3 years. A slide of at least 15 basis points since Monday. That was the story for 5, 10, and 30-year Treasury yields. The data also prompting traders to price in higher odds of Federal Reserve interest rate cuts beginning as soon as November. The Fed may offer some hints of their next move when they meet next week. Ahead of that meeting, the U.S. employment report for May, that's going to be released this Friday, and May inflation data is due for release a week from today. 2-year yields right now, 4.78. That's actually up 1 basis point. The 10-year up 1 basis point at 4.34. I'm John Tucker, Bloomberg Radio.
All right, John, thank you. Well, on the equity front, shares of Hewlett-Packard Enterprise up about 15% in early trading. The company reported revenue that beat analyst estimates. We get the story from Bloomberg's Charlie Pellet.
HPE saw a big jump in sales of servers built to handle artificial intelligence work. The company's server business generated sales of $3.87 billion. Analysts on average estimated $3.45 billion. Sales of AI-oriented systems doubled to more than $900 million compared with the first quarter. CEO Antonio Neri said increased demand and better availability of high-powered semiconductors from NVIDIA led to the jump in AI system sales. In New York, Charlie Pellet, Bloomberg Radio.
Thanks, Charlie. And Intel has agreed to sell a stake in a venture that controls a plant in Ireland to Apollo Global Management. The price tag, $11 billion. The sale will help Intel bring in more external funding for a massive expansion of its factory network.
And it's time now for a look at some of the other stories making news in New York and around the world. For that, we're joined by Bloomberg's Michael Barr. Michael, good morning.
Good morning, Karen. Witness testimony is expected to continue today in Hunter Biden's gun trial. Federal prosecutors spent hours showing jurors evidence of his drug problem. They are seeking to show his addiction was still going on when he bought a firearm and lied on a form to purchase it. Hunter Biden's ex-wife is expected to be among the witnesses to take the stand. She was married to President Joe Biden's son for 20 years. Hunter Biden has pleaded not guilty. We're learning more about a potential disaster avoided on the ground at one of the busiest airports in the country. 2 airlines came within hundreds of feet of one another at New York's Kennedy Airport in January of last year. NTSB investigators say air traffic controllers cleared a Delta 737 for takeoff. However, 20 seconds after the Delta plane began its takeoff, an American Airlines 777 destined for London crossed the same runway without a clearance. Stephen Abram is a retired JFK air traffic controller.
Luckily, his reaction time was rapid, and the flight crew's reaction time was also rapid, which prevented something worse from happening.
The NTSB said numerous factors contributed to the American Airlines captain's mistake, including interruptions and multitasking during critical moments of ground navigation. The captain later told investigators, "I lose sleep over this one because I can't figure out why I missed the turn." Republicans on the House Judiciary Committee fired questions at Attorney General Merrick Garland over certain claims about how the Department of Justice operates. Garland rebuked Republican claims that the DOJ is being weaponized. Garland says law enforcement officials are facing increased threats, in part due to Republicans' accusations and rhetoric about DOJ investigations and trials.
We have worked to combat a worrying spike of threats of violence against those who serve the public. Those threats have included targeting of members of Congress, police officers, judges, jurors, election workers, and the Justice Department's own employees.
Garland faces the threat of being held in contempt by House Republicans for refusing to release the audio of President Biden's interview with the special counsel over Biden's handling of classified documents. The written interview was released earlier. Global news 24 hours a day and whenever you want it with Bloomberg News Now. I'm Michael Barr, and this is Bloomberg. Karen.
All right, Michael Barr, thank you. Time now for the Bloomberg Sports Update. Here's John Stashower. John, good morning.
Good morning, Karen. Bad enough for the Minnesota Twins. They can never seem to beat the Yankees. That's been going on for a couple of decades now. And this season, the Yanks 4-0 versus Minnesota by a combined score of 19-2. But also the Twins had Luis Gil in their organization, and they traded him to the Yankees. And Gil has been the best pitcher in baseball the past month. At the stadium, he went 6 innings, allowed only 1 hit in the Yanks' 5-1 victory. Gil's manager is Aaron Boone.
It's just hard to get a hit off of him. It's just his stuff really plays. You know, the fastball is real. The hitters show you that every time. But you see just how good his changeup is. And the changeup's been, a genuine second pitch factor for him pretty much every start.
The Yanks got home runs from Gleyber Torres, Giancarlo Stanton, Aaron Judge, a 2-run double. Yanks have won 6 in a row. Mets won in Washington 6-3. They led 5-1. Nothing easy for the Mets. Nationals had the tying run at the plate in the 9th inning. Home runs for Harrison Bader, a long one for Pete Alonso. WNBA, the Liberty, after beating Caitlin Clark and the Fever by 36, beat Angel Reese and the Sky 88-75. Breanna Stewart scored 33, and Reese was ejected in the fourth quarter. She got 2 technicals. The NBA Finals begin tomorrow night in Boston. Celtics and Mavs, and Boston's Kristaps Porzingis says he is going to play. First time since early in the playoffs when he hurt his calf. He used to play for Dallas. Only one men's quarterfinal at the French Open today because Novak Djokovic withdrew with a knee injury. So Casper Ruud moves on. It means none of the players still in the men's field have ever won the French Open before. John Stashower, Bloomberg Sports, Karen and Nathan.
Coast to coast on Bloomberg Radio, nationwide on Sirius XM, and around the world on Bloomberg.com and the Bloomberg Business app. This is Bloomberg Daybreak.
Good morning. I'm Nathan Hager on a busy morning for global politics with coalition talks underway in India as Prime Minister Narendra Modi fights to hold on to power. UK Prime Minister Rishi Sunak and Labour leader Keir Starmer holding their first debate ahead of next month's election. And President Biden now in Paris for D-Day observances and talks with the president of Ukraine. Let's bring in Bloomberg Europe, Middle East and Africa News Director Rosalind Matheson for more on these stories. Ros, good morning. Get us up to speed on what's happening in India, because we've seen headlines crossing the Bloomberg terminal that Narendra Modi could be sworn in for a third term as soon as this weekend. Where do coalition talks stand?
Well, that's right. They're trying to hurry things up to reassure markets and people in general that Modi is still in charge and will soon be back in the chair. But he does have these difficult negotiations going on today in New Delhi with 2 of his key alliance partners. And these are veteran politicians of big states who have pulled out of his alliance before and come back. So they're a bit fickle, one could say, and no doubt they're going to be ready to drive a hard bargain in order to promise their loyalty to him. They are saying publicly their intent is to work with him to form a government, but no doubt behind the scenes they'll be negotiating heavily to do so. So if they do stick, that means that Modi does have enough seats in total in his alliance to form that government. Although either way, it'll be a pretty tricky, pretty unstable administration potentially, and that's a change for Modi, who's used to being very much in the driver's seat. This government will be fractious potentially, and you're going to see a lot of horse trading that will go on well beyond the formation of the government, and that will probably keep markets at least on their toes for a while. So there'll be question marks about the durability of it either way. But certainly what we're waiting to see is the outcome of those negotiations that are currently underway in New Delhi as we speak.
What do you think the outcome is following last night's first debate in the UK for Sunak and Starmer?
Well, it was interesting to watch the debate because obviously Rishi Sunak, the Prime Minister, is very much on the back foot here into this election. His Conservative Party is trailing quite badly in the polls, and all the opinion polls are pointing, by a big surprise, to a Labour victory. The question is the margin potentially of that Labour victory. So it's really for Sunak to try and make up this ground in these debates. And it does seem as though he landed some blows, particularly talking about what he said was going to be a tax hit to households of £2,000 if Labour is elected. In fact, he said £2,000 about a dozen times at least that we counted in the debate. I mean, Labour says that figure is false, of course, but it does seem to be resonating a bit with voters. The question is, did he do enough in that debate to really move the needle? It doesn't seem so. Most of the polls done afterwards show that maybe Sunak had a slight edge in the debate, but not a significant one. And Starmer sort of scored when it came, coming across as credible, as empathic with voters in the debate. So Sunak probably needed to do more than that to move the needle. We've still got about a month out into the election. We've got more debates to come, but it seems like what they're really going to be fighting over are two key topics. One is the economy and taxes, and the other one's going to be migration.
30 seconds left, Roz. What should we be watching for as President Biden arrives in Paris?
Well, he's actually got not much, I think, on the schedule until tomorrow, when he's going to join other leaders for the anniversary of the D-Day landings at Normandy. You've got leaders from other countries going there also, and then he's set to, it seems, to have a separate conversation with Macron, and also he's going to meet the Ukrainian leader Volodymyr Zelensky a couple of times, both in France and then at the G7 meeting in Italy that's coming soon. So it's going to be probably again about trying to shore up that sense of global support for Ukraine, probably some delicate conversations with the Europeans about aid, including weapons on that front, and no doubt some conversations also about the situation in the Middle East. So there'll be a number of broad topics on the agenda for those conversations: Ukraine, the Middle East, and China.
This is Bloomberg Daybreak Today, your morning brief on the stories making news from Wall Street to Washington and beyond.
Look for us on your podcast feed at 6 a.m. Eastern each morning on Apple, Spotify, and anywhere else you get your podcasts.
You can also listen live each morning starting at 5 a.m. Wall Street time on Bloomberg 1130 in New York, Bloomberg 99.1 in Washington, Bloomberg 106.1 in Boston, and Bloomberg 960 in San Francisco.
Our flagship New York station is also available on your Amazon Alexa devices. Just say, Alexa, play Bloomberg 1130.
Plus, listen coast to coast on the Bloomberg Business app, SiriusXM, the iHeartRadio app, and on Bloomberg.com. I'm Nathan Hager.
And I'm Karen Moscow. Join us again tomorrow morning for all the news you need to start your day right here on Bloomberg Daybreak.